This story starts in the heart of the great demon palace Garak, the Hall of the Abyss. Within this vast hall, boasting the greatest grandeur on earth, a group of men and women had gathered. They were powerful figures from across the continent, transcending gender and age. There was the muscular middle-aged man with a body of steel that never breaks, Teslan, the martial king. The continent's strongest swordsman, Cyrus the Sword Star, who could split even souls with a single slash of his sword. Ellen, the holy maiden of the supreme god Saya, possessor of infinite divine power. Jade Arclight, the great light mage blessed with mana. And standing before them, the blonde-haired, pale-eyed young man, Prince Alex von Hallein of the Kingdom of Hallein, known as a hero to the world for his mastery of the sword, magic, and divine power. Their gaze was collectively fixed on the opposite staircase. Dressed in a blood-red robe, a middle-aged man with an arrogant demeanor looked down on them indifferently. Alex shouted at him, "Your evil deeds end now, Demon King Ripenhard. Demon King Ripenhard. The Emperor of the Dark Empire Antares and the most powerful and evil sorcerer in human history. A true demon god incarnate, who led 1,000,000 soldiers of darkness, wielded powerful dark magic to burn half the continent, and massacred millions. For the sake of defeating this evil demon king, tens of thousands of soldiers sacrificed their lives, cutting through the dark forces. They bled rivers and threw their lives away like dogs, never sparing a thought for their own survival. On the foundation of these heroic sacrifices, the chosen champions of humanity successfully infiltrated the great demon palace of Garak and, after a fierce battle, finally stood before the demon king. The chosen hero, Alex von Hallein, tried to calm his overflowing heart as he continued. The time has come for you to return to the darkness. Evil demon king. In truth, Demon King Ripenhard wasn't looking indifferent. It's just that his naturally cold demeanor made it hard to tell, but he was actually looking down at Alex and his party with a great sense of emptiness. Sword Star Cyrus, wielding his long sword illuminator that shimmered with a blue light, shouted, "Demon King Ripenhard, we will destroy you and put an end to the history of this dark empire." It was unjust. He had worked hard to establish his empire. After 3 days of deep contemplation, he had even given it the magnificent name of Antares, after a throne's title. So why ignore a perfectly good name and only call it the Dark Empire? It was an ordinary place where the sun rose in the morning and the moon at night. The muscular middle-aged brute praised as the martial king continued his companion speech. If you disappear, the demonic nature of those corrupted monsters will vanish as well. Vanish my foot. They were always like that. What, did ogres, gnolls, and goblins live peacefully and then get corrupted because of Ripenhard? They just didn't gather in numbers before to dare attack humans. All he did was take them in and teach them tactics used by humans. Those who would normally flee at the sight of humans or, if they attacked, could be easily killed, suddenly started using group tactics like an army. And now everyone's making a fuss, claiming they've been corrupted or soaked in demonic energy, but in truth, it's all just human behavior being mirrored. Ripenhard opened his mouth with a tired voice. Of course, Alex and his companions thought of it as the dark and evil tone befitting of a demon king. Asterisk. Have all my 4 heavenly kings fallen? The strong individuals from the 4 races who followed Ripenhard. Those precious subordinates who had been loyal and had trusted him for a long time. He worried about their well-being. Sword Saint Cyrus proudly held up his sword and replied, "Yes. That filthy orc was no match for my sword." Ripenhard sighed, remembering Tacid, the brave orc warrior with high martial pride. The orcs, living in tribes, hunting, and gathering, might seem barbaric and simple, but they were pure beings who knew nothing of betrayal. They took pride in fighting against the harsh nature of the world, protecting the weak, and standing against the strong. Why should this warrior race be treated as monsters? Well, they hardly ever bathed, so being called filthy wasn't exactly wrong. Martial King Teslan clenched his fist and joined in. That hideous monster troll paid the price for his sins. It seems that the wise and knowledgeable Grand Sorcerer, Guru Attila, has also returned to the Earth's embrace. Honestly, trolls do look a bit scary. With their bulging blue skin and protruding tusk-like teeth, even Ripenhard would get startled if he bumped into Attila on a dark night, so it's understandable. But to call them hideous monsters is outrageous. Trolls live deep in the mountains under a shamanistic faith. Living with the bare minimum given by nature, refining their souls instead of owning material things, they might seem primitive but possessed an advanced spiritual culture. There was no reason for them to be called monsters. Saint Ellen quietly opened her mouth. The evil dwarf who once served the dark god has also returned to the rightful flow. The high priest of Alford, Makelin, seems to have died as well. Ripenhard clicked his tongue. He couldn't recall when the dwarves' racial deity, Alford, became an evil dark god. Such arrogance to consider all but the main god Saya, who protects humans, and the 12 gods as evil beings. The Mage of Light, Jade, faintly smiled and said, "That corrupted dark elf fought with me." "A corrupted dark elf?" "Yes, her skin is indeed somewhat dusky. Driven out and hunted because humans plundered and cut down the forests where her people lived, she eventually made her way to live in the barren wastelands, getting significantly tanned by the wilderness's blazing sun. Is a pure-blooded high elf considered a dark elf just because she got a bit of a tan? And she couldn't match up to my magic." Upon hearing Jade's voice that followed, Repenhard finally closed his eyes. "Ah, Cirrus. Even you, in the end?" Originally, Repenhard was an ordinary archmage. Well, one cannot really call someone an archmage and ordinary at the same time, but still, he wasn't the kind of being who wielded the tremendous, beyond common sense magic he does now. He changed when he sought a new realm of magic, turning his eyes towards the cultures of non-human races. How long had it been since the supreme god, Saya, created humanity? The world was already dominated by humans. The various races that once contended for supremacy over the continent, like elves, trolls, dwarves, and orcs, had all lost their power and declined significantly. Humanity had subsumed Almisi races under their system, and the outcome was Nars. Humans did not regard these races as beings of equal intelligence. Elves, known as the fairies of the forest, were popular as pretty and long-living servants. The dwarves, the robust sons of the earth, were valuable as slaves for their skill in digging and craftsmanship. The orcs, a race of proud warriors, were ideal as strong and simple-minded laborers. Trolls, with their astonishing regenerative abilities, were not even considered for slavery. They were caught and sliced up to be used as ingredients for healing potions. How astonished must Repenhard have been to realize that great secrets were hidden within the forgotten cultures of these enslaved races, all of whom had lost their pride and dignity. He soon followed the ancient traces of these races. Fortunately, not all non-human races had become slaves to humanity. There were a few, gathered in unexplored regions untouched by humans, who were desperately preserving their cultures. Meeting them, learning their cultures, and combining elf spirit magic and troll shamanism with his own, Repenhard was able to innovate a new realm of magic. He became the first magician in history to wield 10th circle magic. As he continued to interact with these races, Repenhard's values naturally changed. No longer were these beings mere slaves to him. Consequently, he could not stand by and watch the atrocious realities rampant in human society. So, he seized every opportunity to rescue the enslaved non-humans, diligently arranging ways for them to live. Over time, the villages of the hidden non-humans grew to a size that could no longer deceive human eyes. The humans' kings and nobles immediately coveted them when the once enslaved dared to build their own villages. They brandished their swords and spears, leading their knights to invade. Having been attacked, a counterattack was natural. Repenhard's powerful magic, now beyond common sense, could obliterate armies and walls alike. The invaders were completely wiped out. He felt no guilt, it was a case of self-defense. There was no reason to sympathize with them. After eliminating the enemies, the lands they had died possessing became vacant. Thus, I expanded the village and moved various other races to live there as well. Continually they invaded, continually we crushed them, continually lands were emptied, and continually we relocated. In time, what was once a village began to resemble a nation. As Repenhard's fame spread across the continent, even other orc, troll, elf, and dwarf tribes hidden in the far reaches requested to live under his protection. Repenhard, of course, did not refuse. He welcomed all who came. Thus, for years past. The kingdom of Vasily, the Taikan kingdom, the Iactil Nuchu Thako throw a naughty one fall, and in their place the Antarak Emnire was Ham. Beings. Therefore, he did not implement retaliatory policies, such as enslaving humans. Instead, he treated them as equals among the other races. However, people did not see it this way. They believed Repenhard harbored hatred towards humans, gathering dark forces to annihilate mankind and conquer the world. In reality, the citizens of the Antares Empire felt their lives had improved. Yet, there were claims that Repenhard had deceived the populace with wicked magic. With the establishment of the empire, full-scale invasions by other nations ensued. Initially, it was one nation, then two allied against him, eventually, a coalition of 3 countries attacked. Each time, Repenhard repelled the invaders with powerful magic. As the human forces grew, so did the challenge of opposing them. Thus, he reached out to intellectually lesser races like ogres, gnolls, and goblins, deemed monsters by humans, and incorporated them into his forces. Despite their brutal and uncontrollable nature, Repenhard succeeded in making them part of his army through extensive mind control magic and ample food. The military might of the diverse races grew day by day. The scale of war escalated. And before he knew it, he was dubbed a Demon King, becoming a subject of fear and hatred among all humans on the continent. Rupenhard opened his eyes. 5 pairs of eyes, filled with a light that was unwavering despite the evident tension, stared back at him with intensity. Truly, those were eyes of steadfast belief. To others, they might seem like eyes full of noble convictions. However, to Rupenhard, they appeared as the gaze of those two caught in their own righteousness, embodying a dangerous mix of self-righteousness and obstinacy. The blond youth, Alex von Hallion, drew his sword. Pointing the royal blade, adorned with lavish decorations, he declared, "I shall soothe the souls of those who died by your hand with this sword." Rupenhard, with a somber tone, retorted, "And who shall soothe the souls of the elves and orcs who have died?" Taken aback, Alex shouted in indignation, "Detestable Rupenhard! Were it not for your vile powers, they would not have fallen to corruption. They could have lived peacefully, fulfilling their true roles. Was it not you who killed them?" It was futile. There was no room for dialogue. In their eyes, he was nothing but an evil demon king. To them, any race that dared to step out of the servitude was merely a dark race, tainted and corrupted by demonic influence. A light of anger flashed across Rupenhard's dark eyes. In that case? Gradually, a purple aura began to rise from his blood-red robe. "I shall become the demon king you so desire." Rupenhard gathered all his magical power. A terrifying momentum swirled around him, as a pillar of purple magic shot up into the sky. Simultaneously, Alex and his companions assumed battle stances. A blue and golden aura emanated from the Martial King and the Sword Sage, respectively. Jade also summoned his magic, and Ellen enveloped the group with a holy aura. Alex charged at the Demon King, sword in hand, crying out, "Ta!" Thus, the battle that would decide the fate of the continent began. Powerful magic shattered the surroundings, as blue sword light and golden martial energy stormed through like a tempest. The aftermath alone was enough to send the hall ceiling flying and crumble the solid granite walls into sand. The marble floor cracked as if struck by an earthquake, and flames sparked by magical aftershocks spread intense heat. Roughly half an hour later, Alex, despite his status as a hero, was the first to fall, coughing up blood. While it might seem ironic for him to be the initial defeat, on closer reflection, it wasn't so surprising. People admired Alex for his skills in swordsmanship, magic, and his possession of divine powers, earning him the title of hero. However, this title wasn't entirely a compliment. In truth, it hinted at his lack of a clear specialty, as if saying, "He seems powerful, but what is he truly best at?" In generous terms, he was a versatile fighter; more bluntly, he was a master of none. In stories, the hero might remain standing to finish off the Demon King, but in reality, success often favors those with deep expertise. Even as Alex fell, the others fought on. True to the proverb, Rupenhard found it difficult to overcome those who dig one well deeply. The battle dragged on, stretching into the night as the moon ascended. Each fighter, specialized in their respective arts, launched unyielding attacks against Rupenhard. Yet, Rupenhard remained unfazed. Sustained by his boundless magic, he effortlessly blocked each assault, delivering fatal counterattacks. Eventually, the Saint Ellen was defeated, the light mage Jade was knocked unconscious, and even the blade of the sword Saint Cyrus shattered, leaving only 2 left in the hall. Teslan, the Fist King, persisted alone against Rupenhard, driven by unmatched physical strength and endurance. His body was an iron fortress, and his resolve unbreakable. Dodging, evading, and occasionally absorbing the most powerful spells, he fought on, wounded and bleeding, yet never faltering. As dawn approached, Rupenhard's seemingly limitless magical power finally started to wane. This marked a turning point for the continent. Without mana, Rupenhard was no different from any mortal, while Teslan, barely clinging to life, had just enough strength left for one last strike. Rupenhard coughed, expelling dark blood clots, the pain piercing his lungs as if they were being skewered. Death loomed. A single punch from Teslan had nearly stopped his body's functions. Though he clung to life through magic, it was clear his time was short. Slumped against a crumbling wall, gasping for breath, Rupenhard gazed at the dawning sky, his face etched with regret. His vision blurred. Is this death? Regret flooded him, not for helping the other races, for he held no remorse about aiding the noble elves, the steadfast dwarves, the courageous orcs, and the wise trolls. What haunted him was his own folly. He had always reacted too passively. When invasion struck, he merely defended himself, never choosing to strike preemptively. Because of this, he allowed other nations the freedom to regroup and rearm. He even created an opening for them to unite against him. Despite the continent rallying together in opposition, he clung to the naive hope that, in time, they would come to understand. This was the price of his beliefs. If he had aimed to protect, he should have done so decisively. He should have anticipated human resistance and the likelihood that the whole continent would turn hostile. Instead of founding a nation by chance, he should have actively planned and established a powerful state to defend the diverse races from the outset. If they called him a demon king, he should have fully embraced the role. What's the use of regret now? With a hazy smile, Ripenhardt's gaze shifted to Teslan, who was slowly rising, leaning on a pillar. He, too, was covered in wounds and blood, but he was alive, not on the brink of death like Ripenhardt. Wiping blood from his lips, Teslan said solemnly, "This is our victory, Demon King Ripenhardt." Yes, they had won. Victory. How satisfying. To be victorious. With no strength left to retort, Ripenhardt closed his eyes, seeking only peace. Then Teslan continued. Soon, the others will also be freed from the demon castle and return to their true forms. Ugh. Ripenhard had been ready to surrender everything, but those words struck a nerve. The demon castle? Their original forms? Did that mean servitude was their true nature? A fierce light reignited in Ripenhardt's eyes as he grasped the injustice of it. His resolve shifted. He couldn't die, not like this. It was too unjust, too enraging. He refused to die here. With his last reserve of strength, Ripenhardt pulled a small gem from his robe. This was an artifact from an ancient ruin, so powerful that even he, a master of the 10th circle, couldn't fully decipher it. It was a spell for temporal regression, a magic capable of bending space and time to send the user backward in time, a spell that defied the natural order and was forbidden by the gods themselves. Since it was magic that went beyond the boundaries of ordinary circles, there was no guarantee it would work correctly. Failure could distort reality, possibly erasing the entire continent. This was why, even on the edge of death, he had hesitated to use it. But now, I have nothing to lose. Gritting his teeth, Ripenhardt slowly began chanting the spell. La perte dem ist sapia. I shall distort the threads of fate and defy the eyes of destiny, *. Teslan's expression shifted in shock. He hadn't expected Ripenhard to resort to this, even in his final moments. Against the current, I shall remain, bound by the law of defiance, *. Impossible, you fool. In a last-ditch effort, Teslan kicked off the ground and charged forward. Ripenhardt's heart raced as he saw the reckless fist heading straight for him. If that powerful blow were to so much as brush him, it would mean his end. Ripenhardt quickly completed the spell. I shall become one who traverses across time and space. A blinding light erupted from the jewel. At the same time, Teslan's fist tore through the light, shattering Ripenhardt's magical barrier. Arg! An immense shockwave of magical energy and golden aura spread outward. The spell, which should have flowed in a controlled pattern, exploded chaotically as Teslan's aura disrupted it, sending it into a wild frenzy. Engulfed by the magic, his consciousness fading, Ripenhard repeated to himself, I can't die. I absolutely won't die like this. His submerged consciousness gradually resurfaced. His numb senses began to awaken. Ripenhard opened his eyes. His vision cleared, allowing him to make out the shapes of objects around him. The distant chirping of birds tickled his ears, and the warm morning sunlight brushed gently against his face. The sensation of soft fabric wrapped around his body felt vivid. This sound, this warmth, this comfort. Am I still alive? Ripenhard blinked, feeling a strange sense of displacement. It was as though he'd woken up from a long slumber, an oddly normal sensation. But soon, his mind sharpened, and everything fell into place. He had been on the verge of death at the hands of Teslan, the Fist King. It was impossible for him to feel so full of life as he did now. It was clear. He was alive. Good heavens, did it actually work? The time reversal spell was one he had barely half understood. It had been a desperate gamble, but Ripenhard hadn't truly expected it to succeed. Judging by his current state, however, it seemed the magic had indeed worked, extraordinarily well. Wow. I knew I was talented, but I didn't really think it would succeed. With a statement that hovered between arrogance and humility, Ripenhard stood up. He surveyed his surroundings to determine how far back in time he had returned. But, where exactly am I? Ripenhardt's face tightened as he took in his surroundings. Everything seemed excessively unfamiliar. In the spacious room, crafted from logs, there were only a few furnishings, a wardrobe, a desk, and the large bed where he had been lying. At first glance, it seemed like a modest bedroom, but what was strange was that although the room itself was plainly built, each piece of furniture was of fine quality. The wardrobe and desk were opulent, fit for nobility, and the bed was an extravagant piece, crafted from sturdy maple, covered in fine linens, and even adorned with elegant gold leaf. Hanging on one wall was a glass mirror, so costly that only aristocrats typically owned such a luxury. What is this? Ripenhard was baffled. No matter how much he tried to recall, he had no memory of such a place. If the time reversal spell had worked, he should have returned to a familiar point in his past, whether his childhood or early years. This place, however, was entirely unknown to him. There was no doubt about it, he had no memory of ever living in such an oddly mixed interior. Ugh! Ripenhard rubbed his forehead, trying to clear his muddled thoughts. Amid the confusion, he rose and walked toward the mirror. If the spell had succeeded, the question now was how many years back he had traveled, and how old he was in this moment. And then he stood before the mirror. Gah! Ripenhard's jaw dropped. What? What is that? In the mirror stood a robust-looking boy with short brown hair, shirtless, staring back at him. Perhaps 16 years old? While his face was young enough to call him a boy, his body was something that even a grown man might envy. He was much taller than most, and his entire frame was lined with hard muscle. His hands were rough and calloused, his arms thick and solid. His biceps and triceps looked so tough they could spark upon impact, and his abdominal muscles were so well defined it seemed unbelievable that they belonged to a human. Even sculpting such perfect abs from marble would seem exaggerated. Despite his muscular build, his body looked proportionate and not bulky, the embodiment of an ideal warrior's physique. But to Ripenhard, who had always aspired to the image of a refined mage, this was nothing more than an unnecessarily brute appearance. Ripenhard unconsciously raised a hand to his cheek. The boy in the mirror did the same. Ha! Ha ha! Ripenhard let out a shaky laugh, mirrored by the boy in the reflection. There was no denying it. He had to accept the truth. This muscular boy was him. In shock, Ripenhard muttered to himself, barely able to believe it. Who are you?